We looked at that for a long time, and maybe unsurprisingly, we decided, no, this is too complicated. And it wasn't that it wouldn't work, because I think it would work, but we're going down a path that we can't back out from. So instead, we did what a kind of a classic engineer thing and said, what is the simplest possible workflow system I could build with no user interface to start, where we would just configure everything in code and properties and like configuration files and stuff and go to town. How hard would that be? And the answer is, it's pretty easy. And we still use it today.
Hey, and welcome to this episode of Build versus Buy, a 30-minute conversation with product and engineering leaders about situations during their career where they've had to decide whether to build or buy. If you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me at Mang-Git@useanvil.com. That's Manggit@useanvil.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe on YouTube, or leave us a rating/review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Build vs. Buy podcast. I'm your host, Mang-Git, CEO and founder of Anvil, the fastest way to build software for paperwork. And today I have Christine. He is the founder and CEO of Treasury Prime. It's really nice to have you on this podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited. Like you said, I'm the co-founder. Jim and I founded Treasury Prime together. We're the winners in this banking as a service space. We have the number one thing. We make software for banks so they can manage these FinTech relationships. And it's the only real safe way to do it in the United States is to go straight to the bank. But challenges of most of the bank software is terrible. But so the banks use our software are great. They can compete with anybody.
Yeah. Maybe before we dive into the Build versus Buy conversation, I would love to get a quick background about your work experience. I know you are a serial entrepreneur. You've done this many times, so I'm sure there's lots of great stories there. And then, of course, we can work our way up to the present day, which is Treasury Prime, and talk a little bit about Treasury Prime specifically and what you guys are building there. So why don't we start? You pick.
Sure. I'll give the mini bio because there's a couple transitions that are interesting to me. So I'm at university and I'm doing my thing. My assumption was I would become a professor at some mid-tier university somewhere. And I was doing machine learning research. I really liked it. That was fun. For a brief moment, it must be like 25 years ago now, I had the biggest machine learning project in like data size ever. And that lasted for 1 second until someone else did something slightly bigger. And I loved that. And I was happily ensconced in that. And then my wife says, we got to move to San Francisco to take care of her parents. And I'm like, okay, I can do that for a minute. And I'll get a regular job for just a year. Yeah. And then I can go back in the publishing trade. And I got work at a startup where I was the first employee. And I didn't know that was hard or special or anything. I didn't even know what the word startup meant, but they were someone who was doing machine learning. And I'm like, I can do that.
Oh.
And
by the way, the Gen Zs call it AI, generative AI nowadays.
I know that's the problem, right? Is that when I was doing it all day, AI meant one thing and machine learning meant another thing. And now AI, no one talks about that anymore, right? Yeah, for 100%. At the time, it was even called data mining. That was the thing too. We did a startup and I fell in love with the startup culture and just the problem. And all my plans with like 6 months in just went out the window. And I'm like, oh, guess I got a new life. I'm not moving out of San Francisco. And the funny thing was, I don't know if you ever saw that old TV show. It was called Silicon Valley. Yes. The guys are doing their startup. Very funny. Part of that was my life, right? And I was like, oh, these people are crazy and terrible. And this is back in the day when you had to have a server room on premise, right? So I had a server room I was renting. Yeah. And there are people who wasn't locked. It was just in the building and near my office. And apparently people were going in there and having sex. And I'm like, dude, you can't do that. And I'm like, oh, I see. This is how it goes. And one of the founders threw a chair at one of the other founders in the conference room. And it was just this terrible experience. But the result of it is I loved the startup stuff, except for that drama. I'm like, okay, how can I have the same work environment, but drama free? And the money's good, the money's the money, but that's not the important thing. It's just super fun to build stuff. And I figured out how to do that. I went to a company to teach me how to do that because I thought this is a well-run company. And then since then, I've been founding my own. I founded 3 or 4. A couple of them have had very good exits. And that led to Treasury Prime. Jim and I, my co-founder Jim and I, we got bought by Silicon Valley Bank during one of these startups. And I was like, I'm not working at a bank. This is crazy. I'll be out in 3 months. Let's just make sure like my buddies are okay.
Quickly though, that company that got acquired by Silicon Valley Bank was called Standard Treasury. So
Yeah.
you see
That's
the
right.
lineage here. Yeah.
I know. Treasury Prime, it's a math joke, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're the next one, Prime. And all the bankers think it's about prime rate or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, sure. It's not what I was thinking, but it's funny that you think that.
If it gets you in the conversation, it works.
We had sold Standard Treasury to Silicon Valley Bank. They were our first customer and our biggest customer. And I ran the FinTech group there, but I didn't think I'd stay. But I really liked the bank. And for whatever weird reason, I'm a technologist. I like to build stuff, like the AI stuff in my background. I really like banking. I still don't know why it is, but I really like it. The US banking especially, it's like the slightly broken computer system with all these different nodes and distributed stuff going on. At the moment, there are 8,400 banks in the US. There's just a lot of them. A lot of them are like doing nothing. Some of them are giant, like JP Morgan. Most of them are doing something. And it's old and creaky, but remarkably resilient. I just like it. And my co-founder, Jim, and I were at Silicon Valley Bank, and we were looking around and said, hey, there's something going on here because the asks for the clients and the product market fit we had at SVB were crazy good as anything I'd ever seen in my entire life. We said we should take advantage of this and do a startup. And we came up with Treasury Prime, which has like an odd business model. And we quit SVB after a couple of years probably and did the normal thing where we did a startup. I wanted to do YC, Y Combinator, so we did Y Combinator. And we sell enterprise software to banks and we make the fintechs who are there really successful. And that has worked out well for us. It has been a very bumpy ride.
Yeah.
We're well into it here. But I love it. Every day is super fun, right? Super fun.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about Treasury Prime's business model. You said it's a funky business model and you guys work with banks and also work with fintechs. So maybe high level describe what it is that Treasury Prime does and I guess what's the funkiness about it?
Yeah. So the obvious way to do this, there's 2 obvious ways to do this. We don't do either of those ways. First obvious way is you become a bank. If you just buy a bank and you are applied to be a bank, the capital requirements are real and like you have to deal with regulators and stuff, but then you can write software for it. You can make deals with fintechs and you can be successful. And there are banks that do this and they're good ones and bad ones, but there are banks that do this. That's one way. That's the obvious way. The problem is your growth is constrained and that frankly, unless you start out as a big bank, it's hard to grow quickly and to be a big bank. The growth rates that we're used to in the software world aren't something that most banks are allowed to do. The regulators will stop them. Yeah. And from the regulator's perspective, that makes perfect sense because they don't want banks to fail. They want banks to be successful. They want to keep things safe. And if you grow real fast, that means you can shrink real fast. And so they don't want that. They want you to grow very slowly and steadily. So Jim and I want to do that because that's too slow. And the other obvious way is that you pretend to be a bank. Like you find a bank or 2 and you rent somebody's charter and you say, let me do whatever I want. You have to give me your blessing. And then I can grow quickly because I'm not actually regulated. And there's a whole bunch of banking as a service middleware providers done this. Synapse is the famous poster child here. Yeah. And we looked at that, so that won't work either because sooner or later you're going to screw up. And sooner or later, the regulator is going to shut you down. And oh my God, that's what happened to Synapse, right? They screwed up. They lost a whole bunch of money by real people. The bank got in trouble. The bank's management got kicked out. Who knows what's going to happen to them? Synapse ended up going bankrupt. And yeah, we didn't want that either. So those are the obvious ways, straightforward ways. And we're like, those aren't going to work. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a network of banks. We're going to make a new banking standard for the US. What do we actually build? we build an API for bank accounts. You make an API call, you open a bank account. You want to send a wire, you make an API call. You want to know your balance or whatever, issue a credit card, whatever you want to do. There's an API for it and it's all centered around this idea of a bank account. And we go to different banks and we sell that to banks and say, you can use this to power your FinTech partnerships. And some are like well-established banks who like have been doing this for a while, but their technology is not where they want to be. So they buy our software. And we teach them how to do basically two things: how to talk to the FinTech so they can sell to them. Because you imagine a banker, like you and I, techie, nerdy, entrepreneur people, right? That's not how bankers are. They don't fit like that. And sometimes the conversations can be very stilted. So we act as a translator for that. And then once they hire FinTechs, partner with FinTechs, we help them manage them, right? But really it's the bank. And our Treasury Prime funky part of their business model is that really we make money through usage, right? You use our stuff and we charge the banks for that. So we want big, successful FinTechs there. But there are a few exceptions, but generally we don't sell to FinTechs, we sell to banks.
Right.
So we're always one removed. We're like, please sign this giant FinTech, please. At the bank, I don't know, maybe next Tuesday, it's, dude, if you don't jump on this, someone else is going to grab them because they're too good. But that's the funky part. And it's very frustrating sometimes because I'm just like, yeah, I would just go. But also it's turned out this is the way that's safest. And we rarely have a bank that has any sort of problem ever, like one. And then the FinTechs are very safe because even if they get in trouble with the bank and get mad at each other, which sometimes happens, you don't get mad at your vendor, the bank can just kick you out. And then how does your business run? Yeah. The nice thing is there's 20 other banks that are willing to take your business that all use the same technology. So you just have to make a commercial deal with them and we'll help you with that. And then all of a sudden you have a network of banks. So you can have more than one bank and you can have two banks, you can move banks. And the banks don't particularly like that, but the FinTechs, it's very safe for them. And that's the funky part, is that we want FinTechs to be successful, but we don't actually sell anything to them.
I guess you guys are almost like the marketplace for the FinTechs and the banks in that sense. But the only person paying is the banks in this case.
Right. We actually have a website, marketplace.treasuryprime.com, which all the banks use as like their mini CRM to manage all these things. Okay. It is funny. Like it's fun. It's like some AI matching algorithm that do dating, because a lot of our work is almost like we're a matchmaker. Oh, so you want to meet a nice girl or boy? That's great. What are you looking for? The FinTechs will enter their stuff, the banks will enter their stuff, and then we'll do a little matchmaking and
do a little swiping left and right.
Just swiping left and right. That's right. And
second date is try opening a bank account with them. Third date.
Yeah. It is funny. We do have a go-to-market. One of our go-to-market teams is all they do is help with this matchmaking problem. And it's very funny to watch the salespeople work because they can't get anyone to sign anything. They're just like, how was the date? Did you like each other? Yeah. That's all they really do.
It's vendor therapy. That's what it is. Oh, man. So there must be an arm, like one of the go-to-market teams, they must just be focused on trying to get more startups into this ecosystem. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay. It's split brain, right? You got the people focused on the FinTechs, but all they can really do is do lead gen and funnel maintenance. They can't actually close any deal because it's very rare for a FinTech to actually sign with us because they only sign with the bank. And so at the end of the day, we just got to give it to the bank and say, it's your deal to make. What do you want to do? Which it usually makes sense because all the economic power is in the bank. If you go through there's not so many of them left anymore because they all went bankrupt. But if you go through one of the middlemen people, it's hard because if you're a bank, you can say, oh, you want yield, you want interest? I can give you some. And then you can argue about that, right? Because they have all the control they want. And, oh, you want the price of wires to be lower. Okay, I'll give you that in exchange for this other thing. And it's a deal you can make. And Treasury Prime can't make those deals. In fact, we don't want to, but it does mean that the FinTech ends up getting the best economic deal, which is great, but we can't actually, they never sign with us. So that step when you're trying to sell something, you go, okay, I'll send you the document, the DocuSign, you just sign it.
The anvil etch, Chris.
Anvil etch. There you go. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I forgot about that. And we don't have those right on the FinTech side. And so all we can do is sit in the meetings and go, yeah, it was a good meeting. Do you guys like each other? Maybe you should think about making it permanent.
You should. There's another revenue stream for you, which is like a spiff for every lead that you send over to the banks. And they can.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Cool. Obviously, being in a very complex ecosystem here, American banking system is a very highly regulated, complex system. There are very many reasons to buy instead of build, right? I think this, if you take Plaid, for example, building those integrations to extract the data from banking systems was a big enough problem to create a, $5-10 billion company here. So, and you guys are on the flip side. You're on the, if they're read, you're right. Yeah, maybe let's switch gears here and talk about a build versus buy experience that you've had, or maybe you're on the other side, maybe you're the vendor, but talk through one of those types of decisions and how those typically resolve.
Sure. It's, if you actually look at the tech that we use, we have, our position here is that you want to be as safe as you possibly can. Like, you never want to lose anyone's money. You never want to not be reconciled. We try to reconcile in real time, make sure all the money's there. And then at the end of the day, we make sure everything's synced up. If we're behind in money, it's a big deal. Like, it rolls up to me. Like, we're like, that's an all hands on deck. You can't do anything. You can't do anything else until that's all resolved. And because of that, if you look at our system, everyone thinks, oh, it's the API, it's this thing, it's this feature. It's not any of that. There's this giant workflow system behind the scenes that we use to manage all this money movement. Because if you want to send a wire or something like that, we don't just send the wire. There's approval steps. It actually moves into a settlement account, so because that's easier to reconcile, and then it goes out from the settlement account somewhere else. And usually, as we're doing that, that crosses multiple different ledgers. There's like a ledger, which is like a database of how much money everybody has, and we have one that's great, but the bank also has a separate one from somebody they buy. And so our question early on is, how do we do that, right? Like, how do we manage all this stuff? And we did look at a lot of different pieces here. Like, I have a strong build bias because I think that most stuff is junk, and I only want to work with good stuff. And
you're also an engineer, so you can.
Yeah, I'm an engineer.
The opportunity is there.
I could do it better. That's right. And so generally, like, the things we buy, quote unquote buy, are pretty big pieces. Like, we'll use Postgres, right? Because I don't want to build my own database, and Postgres is a good one. And we're going to use Linux because we don't want to build our own operating system and all this stuff. But they're generally big things. But we had a choice early on, like, when we realized this is actually just a giant workflow system. Do we buy something that is an existing workflow system? And you're going to laugh at this, but we seriously consider, at least I seriously considered for a long time, using Salesforce as the back end for the whole thing. You get a built-in CRM. You get a way that the bank, which they really want to, can see every little thing that goes on. All the approval steps, you end up being like a Salesforce development shop. And we really looked at that. In fact, enough so that I found a bank that was actually doing that. Like, that was their way they solved it. And I talked to them for a long time, how happy they were with the solution, how unhappy, was it easy, hard? And frankly, they loved it. Everything about it was good.
You also get like a built-in sales channel in that sense. I feel like if you say you're using Salesforce as your back-end service, there's a level of trust, I think, especially amongst bankers, that they're automatically, oh, okay, they're good to go. And it feels like in these kind of sales processes, you're not selling the technology, you're selling compliance or like adherence to a certain standard that they've somehow decided is the industry standard.
Yeah, that's 100%. And there's a marketplace they have that Salesforce has. So, and if you're a bank and you don't know what you're doing, to have someone say, oh, I can just click on this and like I can get started, like, that's really powerful because no one in the bank wants to replace all of their systems. They just want to add to it. And we looked at that for a long time, and maybe unsurprisingly, we decided, no, this is too complicated. And it wasn't that it wouldn't work, because I think it would work, but we're going down a path that we can't back out from. So instead, we did what a kind of a classic engineer thing and said, what is the simplest possible workflow system I could build with no user interface to start, where we would just configure everything in code and properties and like configuration files and stuff and go to town? How hard would that be? And the answer is, it's pretty easy. And we still use it today. We've upgraded internals of it like 3 or 4 times. But, excuse me, the basic idea is really simple. We have some custom code that we run. It backs up into Postgres. There's a queue of work to be done in there. There's, depending on what you're doing, there's different publishers and different subscribers that do different steps. It does a step, it writes it out, it's done. Everything. And then over the years, we built a UI for it and everything. But it is funny that the thing we work on, maybe for a while more than anything else, was not anything except we need to make this workflow system better because it turns out all of this frankly was a genius decision in retrospect. We were really smart about it because it turns out all these banking systems are really flaky.
Yeah.
And so over time, the workflow system we built changed to be like, it has to be really good at retrying steps and like making sure that like basically doing complicated 2-phase commit things to make sure that things actually worked. And if you can see, like right now, probably the number one bug that we see is still some backend system being flaky and us having to get around that. And I don't think Salesforce ever could have done that. I don't think we could ever have made it because so much of the workflow system was, and now you do the step and you're done. So now you do the step, and now you have to check the step work because you did it, it said it worked, and then you checked it and it didn't work. What's up with that? But that happens to us like literally every day.
And of course, because this is banking, the way you write things to your Postgres is through an FTP file upload that then gets stored in.
I do not, because that's a terrible idea. But yeah, it does turn out that most of the banking stuff is we connect the banks use the way banks runs. They run this thing called a core.
Yep.
And the banking core is just keep track of everyone's money and everything else. And these are old archaic systems. Our first core was built in the 80s that we connected to, and they're flaky and slow. And we have API calls we make to them to do things like, I want to move money from this account to that account. And like, sometimes it just doesn't work. And what do you do in that case? So you take a breath and you retry in 5 minutes or 5 seconds.
How do these cores work in today's era, given that they were all created, or not all, but many of them were created in a pre-internet world? They were not designed to be interconnected. And so you guys are that connection point. And presumably you need to connect into this bank's core somehow. How do you do that from your perspective?
Yeah, it depends on the core. Pretty much all the cores by now have a way, all the real-time cores, which is like 90% of them, have a way where you can talk to them. And if you're lucky and it was built like in the last 15 years or so, then there's a SOAP or a REST interface that you can use it. And that's just regular. They don't work very well generally, but they exist. And if you find something earlier than that, it's all over the map. We have one which is basically just a TCP server that you send XML to, and we send something to it and it replies back in XML sometimes, and the connection gets dropped periodically, but it's too expensive to stand up a new one every request. So it's this whole algorithm, and the workflow system handles all of that, right? Where I tried to do this, it's down. I'll try again. Oh, it's still down. I'm going to kill the old one, stand up a new one, wait for that to come up, and then send my message again. Oh, that worked. Great. Let's go. And that has to all be automatic, right? Because the systems on the back end are too flaky. Most of our competitors who started doing one of the other models are now dead, but no one even tried to do this because they were like, this is too hard. The systems are too flaky. They did what you said. The joke that you made, that's like what they actually do. Yeah. They would do end of day or sometimes end of week, some files that they would send and say, let's sync those up. And when that works, that's great. Yeah. And when it doesn't work, which is like a lot, then it's not so great. And then you have a team of people. You have to figure it out.
But then you also have, in that scenario, you almost have to run your own core internally to manage your own ledger that then syncs up with all the bank cores. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And building just a ledger is actually pretty easy. If you think about it, like I'm going to build an immutable ledger, the basics, especially on something like Postgres, are very easy. I'm just always going to insert a row whenever I do anything. And then if I want to know my balance, I'm going to add up all the rows. And if I'm like, I can cache that if I'm lazy, which we are to do. That's actually pretty easy. The problem is when things get out of sync, what tools do you use? Like I said, I got $1,000 wire, $10,000 wire, and I'm looking at my bank account. I don't see it. Where is it?
Yeah.
What do you do? Because the money has to be somewhere, right? And where is that money? And you think, oh, everything just works out every day. Basically, it doesn't. Basically, every day there's a problem.
Yeah.
And we have systems to automatically do this. We have a whole AI reconciliation tool to help with this problem, but it still exists. And I tell you, if we didn't have our system we built that talks directly to the cores, it would be much, much harder.
Yeah, I was wondering when you would get into the AI and like the buzzword of the day, which is agentic systems, right? Just like at what point will the Treasury Prime AI just move money for me before I even know I needed to move the money?
Yeah, we have things internally, right? But we do. But basically, the banks are terrified of this problem, and rightly so. Like we have a reconciliation, a recon tool where it looks at it. Basically, recon is it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
There's money over here, and there's money over here, and this should be the same amount of money. Like I should agree. It's like double entry accounting, right? I should agree that the money that came in and the money that went out, and if I take all those, that should add up to the total money that moved that. And it doesn't quite often because there's a screw up somewhere. And so our recon systems, it's an AI, it's good at finding those problems and says, you're out of balance by $1,000. And it's because of this thing that happened that should have happened but didn't. And the fix is sometimes you got to try again, or you have to make up money, or you have to move money from here to there. And our recon tool never does anything except say, you should do one of those. Let me know when you're done.
Yeah.
It refuses to touch them because the bankers they're like, no, I don't want a computer deciding to move money.
It does the banker, you present that problem to the bankers and they select how to handle.
That's right. The bankers do it. Yeah.
Got it.
Because it's their money. And I will tell you something, Mang-Git, that you'll find very unsurprising, but most people don't think of it. When you lose someone's money, they get real mad. Like, even if it's just a little amount of money.
Yeah.
And so the bankers don't want anyone mad at them, basically. They want everything double checked because they're afraid that if it's automatic, the money will be lost. They're not going to be mad at the computer. The client will be mad at them.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's surprising that people would be mad when you lose money. But yeah, that's super fascinating. I mean, we could go on forever about the American banking system and how it feels in some ways it's a surprise that it still runs given how slightly broken it is, but also maybe the slightly brokenness means that it's so impenetrable by most people that it actually is, it makes it more resilient. I don't know. Sounds like that's the case with a handful of the competitors that, that operate in your space.
They're just not used to keeping, the point of the financial system is to keep money safe and sound. That's the point. That's one of the taglines of one of the regulatory agencies, safe and sound. And I'm all about that, where if you look at the typical startup, they're about moving very quickly. And if you make some mistakes, it's okay. Yeah. And like, I agree, it is okay if you make some mistakes, except if it's with someone's money. You can't do that. And there's all sorts of things where, should you open a bank account for someone in Russia with ties to child trafficking? Let's go with no, don't do that. That means you have to check that stuff, right? And so most banks are like, I don't even want to deal with anyone in a different country. Let's just stick with the US. And that does mean that there's an opportunity for a bank that's willing to open bank accounts for people in other countries. And for a long time, that was Silicon Valley Bank's one of their niches. They would do that. And the fact that most banks won't is an opportunity for fintechs. And that's great. Like Mercury does that, right? Mercury will open up bank accounts for people in other countries. Commercial bank accounts are owned by people. They're US corp usually. And you can only do that if you're really careful. And I think Mercury is really careful, but a lot of the early stage people were not. They were just like, we'll figure it out later. And then they would realize there was fraud and there was money laundering, and then they would get yelled at by some regulator. And then the bank would get yelled at by some regulator, and the bank would say, "You're done. We're kicking you out."
Shut it
And
down.
that, yeah, we had one competitor that get kicked out of, I think, 4 different banks because of this.
Wow.
I'm like, yeah,
Did you not learn your lesson the first 3 times?
yeah, come on. I know you got a lot of money in the bank for marketing, but
Yeah.
you can't work without a bank, so don't do that.
It's an existential threat for you. Cool. That was a fascinating kind of diversion into the American banking system and learning about Treasury Prime. Obviously, if you're a FinTech out there and you're interested in working with banks, check out Treasury Prime. I would say that's probably your best bet. It's safe for the banks and for you, and you have optionality.
Yeah, it's great technology, and frankly, it's interesting. All the fintechs we use at our banks all are more than one bank, all of them. And it's basically it's like if you never expect to scale and never expect to get big, yeah, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. But if you expect that you're going to grow and you're going to get big, then you're going to end up being at 2 banks. You don't have to use us, but that does mean you're going to have to do all this work. So it's way easier just to use one of our many banks who can do this.
And it's the same interface for you.
It's the same interface. And you can happily, behind the scenes, know that there's a workflow system, which I'm frankly still surprised works because it's all Postgres in the background, right? And I'm like, how many requests per second can we handle? I don't know. I haven't hit that. We periodically spin up a system just to test it. And it's like, we deal with like hundreds of thousands a day kind of thing, maybe millions on a busy day. And we're going to put 10 billion requests in and see how it works. It's fine. Postgres is just too good. I keep trying to break it. It won't fall over.
It handles it. Yeah.
It just handles it. Yeah.
Awesome. Chris, thank you for the insightful stories and especially the story around building your own workflow system. I think that you could have gone with Salesforce. There would have been a ton of bells and whistles that they would have sold you, but it sounds like at the end of the day, that would have just made the problem more challenging. You just need the simple thing.
Yeah. And I think that's partly why, I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
But we have this bias, like we could just build it ourselves for sure. But part of that is we want optionality.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we chose a path that had optionality. The company already has too many dependencies right now. We have to depend on the banks to do stuff and the banking cores to work a certain way and the banking system to work. So we have too many variables here.
Yeah.
And card networks, Visa and MasterCard have to do all this stuff. But it's nice that there's one part of the world where we're in control of our own fate.
Yeah. Awesome. I do typically like to wrap up these conversations with some fun questions at the very end. And so the question that I have for you, Chris, is maybe share something that you've been working on, either personally or professionally, that you're really excited about. So that's the first question. And we have another fun one after that.
I can write a program that doesn't crash. I'm okay at that. But I don't do that. Like I have this job. We have a very busy company. There's lots of moving parts. Go to the market side. So I generally don't write code. And the further away I get from writing code every day, the easier it seems. Why aren't you done yet? Because that seems easy. But I know that's not true. But I've been vibe coding recently just to write apps. Wouldn't call it vibe coding because I look at every single line and but that's one project that was interested in that marketplace I mentioned. I built that by myself just as a goof.
Yeah.
And the original name was Matchmaker, as a goof, right? It was an internal demo. And then we looked and said, we should rebrand this and ship it. So we did. And that's kind of the side project. And I'm incredibly impressed with how much more productive I can be. I know other people are have agents and are doing letting it do huge amounts of code. I don't do that.
Yeah.
I watch every line, but the productivity's been crazy good. I feel like I've always been a productive guy, but I feel I'm double or triple with the AI stuff because it can just do all the mechanical stuff. Yeah, I know how to do that, but just you go ahead, write that page, build that form. Right.
It feels like for me, it really helps me with context switching because I don't get into our code base very often, but when I do, I have 30 minutes at a time. And it's really hard to load the system into your brain, but if you let the AI help you with that, I can very quickly navigate through the code base. I understand the architecture of our system at a degree that is good enough that I can direct the AI to help me to the right place, and then very quickly start editing code, and then go jump on a sales call.
Yeah. I'm always thinking that it's like, my experience here has been, it's like a good intern. We were probably both interns at some point,
Yeah.
right? We're smart, we're eager as heck, but we're dumb. We actually don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the AI is like that. It does something like, amazing, great job, ship that. Woo. And then it does something else. I go, are you insane? This is awful. Shit, and start over.
I had an agent write some tests for me the other day, and we have a whole library of tests. We have really good test coverage at Anvil.
Yeah.
And they went in and wrote a test, a brand new file, and used a completely different testing framework. I'm like, what are you doing? We use Mocha. We're not using Jest. Go here, look at these files, and then rewrite the whole thing. But I don't know where it got the idea that it needed to come up with a whole new testing framework, or oftentimes it just like stubs out the actual function that I'm testing. I'm like, no, I don't want just, that's the function you need to test. Don't stub that one out.
I know. And if I think of it like it's an AI, it's smarter than me, I fail. But if I think of it's like an intern that's dumber than me, it's great.
Yeah.
It's just like managing some knucklehead 20-year-old, right? I'm like, yeah, great. I was a knucklehead 20-year-old. That's fine. I know how to talk to you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is, I just do a git reset. I restart Claude, which is what I use, Claude Code. And I say, reread the instructions and try and do it. And I give it another hint. And second time, it's like, oh yeah,
Got it.
it's fine.
It requires some coaching.
Okay.
Cool. And then the last question that we always ask is share one product that you've purchased recently that you would either buy again or would never, ever buy again.
I'm on the AI hype train land. So that's all the AI stuff that I'm looking at. It's a good question. I'll go back to Claude Code. Like Claude Code, I don't know, how much did I pay them? $100, $200 a month, something, a lot, but it's life-changing, right? And I've used a lot of different tools, but it's the one that actually does the work for me. And I say, do this, and then I can review it, and it's magical. There's some other things like that. We use Coworker, which is like a tool internally that monitors our Slack and everything that we can ask questions to, and I would like that too. I need an analysis done the other day of how many manual interventions did the product team do, the engineering team do to fix something that couldn't be fixed using the existing user interface. And it was hard to get that data. And eventually I realized I could just ask Coworker, and I had to carefully move it along. I couldn't just ask for the answer because it was too big an ask. But I said, make this list, now make this list, now merge those lists. And like, that worked, and it came up the report, and there was, wow, how'd you do that? You're so smart. I'm like, I didn't do anything. It's a tool.
I asked the right questions in small enough chunks to the AI to do it for me.
Yeah. I asked the answer, and it gave me some junk, so I asked smaller and smaller questions until I got the answer I wanted. Yeah. So Coworker and Claude would probably be right with AI tools.
That sounds like the engineering mindset at the end of the day, which is how do you take a big problem and break it into small enough chunks that you can then actually accomplish something with.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in awe of these people. I don't know if it's a good idea, frankly, but let's pretend it is. I have 5 agents running, and I'm checking on their status from my phone, and I'm like, I don't even know how that would work.
I'm not there yet, and maybe it's a little bit of you don't know what you don't know. I feel like we're of the generation that had to read the docs and use tests to reverse engineer stuff, and so when you've never had to do that, maybe it's just like, oh yeah, it's just doing its thing and it's going to be good. And then
it's fine.
It's binary, right? It's binary.
Like a lot of people, like you, I wrote too much C code to ever trust a computer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a point. It's going to go crazy unless you're careful. Don't screw this up.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. This was an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to do this podcast. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you around at the conferences. I'm sure you'll be at probably Money 2020 or one of those big FinTech conferences.
We have a whole thing. We have the cabana and the talks, and you should combine, have free breakfast. And banks are in love with stablecoin at the moment, so we're all like having big stablecoin talks.
Stablecoin.
Stablecoin. That's right. I like stablecoin. Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you found this show valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or here on YouTube. We'd love if you could leave us a rating and/or a review, as that helps others find this podcast. See you next time.